it still surprises me that many people, when they think of owning a wine brand, they think you have to be a millionaire, you have to be a celebrity, or you have to own a wine farm. And so, if I had 100,000 rands to start and launch a wine brand today, this is how I would spend it. The reality is, there is a difference between a winery and a brand. A winery produces wine and creates brands. A wine brand doesn't have to be a winery. A wine brand can produce wine without owning a winery or a wine farm. If I had 100,000 rands and I needed to start a wine brand today, this is how I would spend it. 100 rands is enough to get started, but not enough, to maximize the potential of a new brand. But I'd spend 50,000 rand on production, and this can get you anything from, depending on the quality, the packaging, and so on. It can get you production on 1,000 bottles, also roughly 1,000 bottles. And now you're left with 50,000 rands, and I would prioritize tasting samples. I would prioritize branding, because obviously you need to be seen, your brand needs to be seen and recognized. So I'll prioritize branding, probably 20,000 rands that would go into stock and branding, and I would use the 30,000 for licensing, trademarks, and so on, just the compliance part of the business. Now your 100,000 budget is blown out, but this is just getting you started. Most people get this wrong. A lot of people make the assumption that, oh, because I love a sweet wine, I'm gonna launch a sweet wine. Oh, I'm gonna get started with 10 different wines. You have to get started in the most leanest way possible. So if you're starting a wine brand at a low budget, no investment, and not much capital, my suggestion would be study the market. Consider what the market needs. Most people think a wine brand is just about the wine itself, putting a label on the bottle, and then voila, you are in business. You're just getting started. The biggest part of the business is not making the wine itself. That is very crucial, but it's in the sales. In my opinion, if you are starting a wine brand but you don't have a market or a strategy how you are going to sell your first 1,000 bottles, you've got no business launching a wine brand. Starting with 10 different wines would be the biggest mistake you'll ever have to do, because now you're going to split yourself in too many different SKUs. If you don't have the marketing budget, that's one way to kill a brand that's starting up. My suggestion, start with one or two and grow from there. When I started Siwela Wines, I actually started with just one wine. I grew from that. Well, I introduced my brand with that, and I added the second one. And I let the brand grow, and I added the third one. And I let the brand grow, and when I was able and capable, I introduced many more. But every bottle of wine I've introduced into the market, it wasn't necessarily because I loved it. It was because I believed that it could benefit and it could work within the market that I was playing in. So a lot of people make this mistake all the time. You want to start a wine brand not because you understand the business part of it or you're interested in the business part of it, but you want to start a wine brand because it is a dream, it's a fantasy. You imagine yourself, picture on the bottle of wine or your name on the bottle of wine. So it's more about your ego than doing it for business. For me, it's just a little bit crazy. So if you really are interested in learning about the business of wine and actually making money out of it, you have to do a little bit more than just launching a wine. The biggest cost nobody talks about running a wine business or a wine brand isn't the wine. A lot of times I speak to a lot of people that I mentor, that I teach, and everybody's asking the question, how much is it going to cost me to make the wine, to source the wine? But that's not your biggest cost in running a wine brand. I'll tell you what is, and it's hidden underneath. So it's the tasting samples that you need before anyone else can actually buy your wine. Unfortunately, that's just how wine works. In order for people to actually try the bottle or buy the wine, they want to taste the wine first, and that's just fair. And you end up using a lot of money through tastings. And another one is trying to fit into retail or trying to participate in retail. That, my darling, is going to cost you. And so another cost that nobody ever talks about is actually trying to convince people that your wine is just as good as any wine that's on the market. And that's just, acquiring the market, because you're not just going to put your bottle of wine out there and say, hey guys, this is my bottle, I'm selling it for 100 rands, please buy. People want more than that. And in South Africa, we have been blessed with, beautiful wines. The market is saturated, or there's just too much to choose from. And so if you're launching a wine brand, you've got to put in a little bit of work than just a label on the bottle. And that means finding your true market positioning, right? What do you stand for? Who do you serve? And why should people buy from you? Why should people buy Siwela wines? And that's the hardest part about owning a wine brand. What's the return on investment? Nobody talks about this. Everybody's talking about, how do I get started? How do I do that? How do I do that? But nobody asks, what is the return on investment? Siwela, how am I actually going to make money from this? Let me tell you, a lot of us do this because we love it. It's a passion. A passion that, of course, we now make money out of. But let me make a scenario. If you've got 1,000 bottles that you've produced, this is your first pallet, your first batch. You've spent 100,000 on your startup costs. Don't expect to get all the returns in one go. So in my experience, what I actually did is that if I had 1,000 bottles, I sold 1,000 bottles, assuming that if it costed you, let's say 60 rands a bottle, perhaps you can sell it at, let's say 100 rands or 150 or so on. It really depends on, your market positioning and everything else about your wine. But the thing is, what people don't realize is that, especially I'm talking about people who don't have a lot of capital to back up their brands or to back up their business. My idea has always been, you sell 1,000 bottles, you invest back into the business. Meaning, you sell 1,000 bottles, you invest back, you produce 2,000 bottles, produce 3,000 bottles, until you can produce 10,000 bottles. And at 10,000 bottles, that's when you can start going into restaurants, hotels, and retailers. Before that, your focus should be DTC, directly to the consumer. And so that's how you get your money back. The thing is, the wine business is a volume business. So you've got to sell those bottles very fast. And when I say very fast, I mean like very, very fast. So if your stock sits for about 3 months, 6 months, then you're losing all your money. It is a volume business, it's a speed business. So the faster you can sell the bottles, the faster you can make your money. And the more money you can actually make. People drink wine every day. So why not sell wine? Mistakes I'd avoid if I was launching a wine brand today. Number 1, not knowing who you serve, not having an identified market. The second one, I think not building relationships. I think any type of business succeeds because of relationships. It's not about how good you are, it's about who you know. Number 3, not investing in yourself. What I've realized is that a business requires you to invest in yourself daily, all the time. So investment isn't just about getting a certain qualification whatsoever. Even as somebody who is into the business of wine, knows nothing about winemaking, you can still learn about winemaking. I've learned that I'm a scientist. I come from, I'm a biotechnologist by profession. Yes, went into the space of wine, turned winemaker, but I'm running a wine business, and that required me to learn about business, to learn about sales, to learn about every aspect of my business, and that is how you succeed. What I learned is that sometimes we go into business and we focus on the product, right? And that's how we lose. That's how we don't understand our pricing, we don't understand marketing, we don't understand our sales, we don't do record bookkeeping, and so on and so on. And that's how you actually suffer. And the other mistake I'd avoid is basically having too many products and having too many SKUs. You don't need that. That just causes frustration. It just, eats away your marketing budget, which you could be using to focus on just one thing. Another mistake is not having a personal brand. In today's time, as a business owner, you need a personal brand. I spent so many years, literally my 8 years in business, building Siwela wines, and I never spent much time building my personal brand. And actually, that's a big mistake. This one is a very, very big mistake. And listen to me, if you're studying any other business or want to launch a wine brand today, please understand what your costs are. And when we speak of cost, we're not talking only about the product. We're talking about packaging, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about marketing, we're talking about overheads. And for some people, we also include rental space in it. So what does it actually cost you to make wine, to make that bottle of wine? People will think wine is cheap. It's costing you 30 rands, it's costing you 40 rands. Why are you selling it for 150? There are so many costs around the bottle of wine that are involved. It's not just the product itself, right? And I think in my experience, the idea that you need to be in certain spaces like retail, for example, restaurants, and so on when you're starting out, that, my dear, is going to send you to the grave. So you have to know your costs in and out. And you have to be very, very honest with yourself. You have to be very confident in your product, and you have to be confident in what you're selling. And this means that you cannot be pushed aside to say that, okay, no, we don't want to buy it for 50 rands, we can only buy it for 40 rands. No, you have to know that it cost me 50 rands and you're never going to sell it for 40 rands. That's the mistake I did when I was getting started. And actually, I still make the mistake in my business, because sometimes you're so passionate, you want people to buy. You end up saying, okay, I'll give it to you for 20 rands. But then in that 20 rands, you're actually losing money. When you are in business, your key focus is to give value to your clients. At the same time, it is to make profit. That's how you survive. You're not going to survive by losing profits, because if you do that, then it's not going to be sustainable. Then tomorrow you've closed your shop. So this is what I'll do with minimum budget for the first 3 months. Of course, you need to get the production going, and then I'll get a website on, I'll get social media pages on, and I'll start creating content as soon as possible. Then I'll start hosting events, wine tasting experiences, so that I can get the content out of it. And so I would spend some time as well educating people about my product, talking to potential clients, and yeah, getting my product out there. Because I think the biggest thing about owning a wine brand isn't just about owning a wine brand, it's about selling the product. So I'll spend most of my time selling the goddamn wine. So if we haven't met, maybe you're asking yourself, why am I in the wine business and why am I even doing all this? So I'm actually I was raised in Limpopo, and I was fortunate enough to study in the Western Cape, and that's where I fell in love with wine, which makes sense. So I am actually a biotechnologist by profession, and I majored in fermentation and microbiology, which then tie into wine. So I then thought wine is such an amazing thing, right? I just got so fascinated, and I thought I could spend the rest of my life doing this. And here I am. So I also spent a few years, about 4 years before I launched my own wine brand, working in the space of wine. So I worked in production, which is winemaking, and quality for a few more years within the wine and spirit field. So I then felt like, you know what, I wanted to build a name for myself within the industry, and I felt that the industry definitely needed more faces like myself. And I thought, why not? I wanted to do this so that I can inspire other young people who perhaps come from where I come from and they can see themselves being represented in what I do in Siwela Wines. And so today I not only own Siwela Wines, but I produce 10 beautiful quality wine, award-winning wines, and it is a female black-owned wine brand. And I launched this when I was just 28 years. And we host amazing wine tasting experiences in Hartbeespoort. And I've also launched the Wine Academy, which is Siwela Wine Academy. So I now teach wine as well. I teach aspiring wine entrepreneurs and anyone really that just is fascinated by the wonderful world of wine. So I'm actually hosting a wine entrepreneurship masterclass and a winemaking experience masterclass on the 18th and the 19th of July. So if this is something that you see yourself doing, I hope to see you there. And if you want to learn more about Siwela Wines, do visit us at www.siwelawines.co.za. Grab yourself a bottle. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what's in the glass or the business, do visit www.academy.siwelawines.co.za. There is some wonderful courses that you can sign up for. And of course, see you for the masterclass. Cheers!